So President Trump referenced the notion that you're the future of the Democratic Party. You are pitching fellow Democrats on a run for the top position on the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah.
The current top Democrat is stepping down.
As you were just talking about Newark, or what's going on as it relates to our food, or what's going on as it relates to these firings and how that is impacting, say, our veterans. I don't know that I'm the future of the Democratic Party, but I do know that in this moment, we need people that are unafraid and willing to go after this administration for the good of the entirety of the country.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's calm exposure of a $137,000 flower bill triggered a whirlwind no one saw coming. Melania Trump's fury, Donald's insults, and even Barron calling 911. This wasn't just another political moment. Stay tuned as we break down how one simple fact turned the Trump world upside down. How does spending $137,000 on flowers even happen? That's the question Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett threw into the spotlight when she revealed one of the more outrageous expenses tied to Melania Trump's time as First Lady.
Last time I checked, there's a lot of people that are actually being grabbed as they are going in for their appointments. In fact, we know that one of the candidates that was recently running in this mayoral, he ended up being arrested because he decided that he was actually going to escort people that are actually showing up to their meetings. You are using a paintbrush to paint an entire group of people where the vast majority of them are coming here because they are actually seeking a better life. Somehow we continue to cherry pick and talk about one criminal act and another criminal act. And it is so very interesting to me that, yes, we will say people are xenophobic.
Yes, you heard that right. $137,000 on flowers, roses, lilies, tulips. Apparently there were enough blooms ordered to fill the White House and then some. But here's the kicker. Guess whose money was footing the bill? That's right, yours. While most of America scrapes by on an average yearly salary of around $60,000, a single receipt for floral arrangements under Melania's watch came out to more than double that. And let's not forget, this wasn't some private indulgence. It all reportedly came out of taxpayer funds. Now, we're not saying the First Lady didn't deserve a few centerpieces here and there. Hosting official events and maintaining White House traditions does, after all, come with certain decor expectations. But $137,000 for flowers? Crockett's blunt revelation forced everyone to pause and ask just how fiscally responsible the Trump administration really was. Remember, this is the same camp that clutched their pearls every time federal spending was questioned. Trump himself constantly slagged off Democrats for wasteful spending, like helping people afford health care. Yet somehow 6 figures on flowers wasn't even worth a raised eyebrow while it was happening.
The fact that you just got done engaging in a conversation where we have a president of the United States who has no idea about the oath that he just took on January 20th tells me everything that I need to know. You know, the thing that actually derived from the oath that he was supposed to take. And he supposedly took an oath, which there's a lot of people that point out that he never put his hand on the Bible. He didn't even have good sense enough in that same interview to say something as simple as, yes, I will follow the Constitution.
Put this number into perspective. Let's take a little detour into reality. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, $137,000 could fund about 2 years of tuition at an Ivy League university. It could cover rent for multiple struggling families. Or, if we're going to stick with the theme here, it could send nearly 15,000 bouquets of roses to your mom on Mother's Day, and throw in some balloons for good measure. But in this case, Crockett says it was used for extravagant decorative needs that notably no one outside the inner Trump circle seemed to know much about. Crockett's questions didn't just center on the high price tag, she zeroed in on accountability. Where exactly did this money go? Who approved such an expense? And why hadn't this caught anyone's attention sooner? This is where the House Oversight Committee stepped in, adding some weight to her concerns. For context, the Oversight Committee isn't just some random panel throwing darts at headlines. Their job is to audit and investigate government spending to make sure public funds aren't being misused. And in this case, Crockett argued misuse might be putting it lightly. The Trump camp's reaction was as predictable as it was chaotic. First, they played dumb, with insiders apparently scrambling to justify the expense. Then came the classic Trumpian pivot: deny, deflect, and distract. For a family that built a brand on calling out supposed swampy behavior in DC, this whole situation was pretty on the nose. It didn't matter whether the flowers were handcrafted by garden fairies at this point. The hypocrisy was starting to stink worse than a forgotten bouquet. Of course, the media had a field day with Crockett's revelation. situation, conservative outlets rushed to downplay it, calling it small potatoes in the grand scheme of government budgets. Liberal commentators, on the other hand, framed it as yet another example of Trump-era frivolity. Either way, the story was out there, and it wasn't going away, especially not after Crockett delivered her points with such calm precision. No yelling, no cheap shots, just hard facts that even the most seasoned spin doctors couldn't flip. The truth is, the flower bill wasn't just about flowers.
The idea that Trump and my Republican colleagues want to restore integrity and security in the visa process is actually a joke. Let me be clear, integrity is not snatching lawful visa holders off the streets and throwing them into unmarked vans. Let me remind y'all that Melania, the First Lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. The First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here.
It marked the starting point of a much larger unraveling for the Trumps. Crockett's questions opened doors to deeper inquiries about other possible expenses that hadn't seen the light of day yet. And for Melania, who's known for staying quiet and keeping low profile, this was shaping up to be one scandal she couldn't avoid. According to insiders, the Trump camp was already scrambling to deal with the fallout. That included fiery tweets from Donald Trump himself and an unexpected reaction from their youngest member, Barron, which added a twist no one had expected. At this point, the cracks were beginning to show, and it was only a matter of time before the whole situation spiraled further. Speaking of spirals, what could possibly make Barron Trump pick up the phone and involve the cops over a flower bill? That's where things take an even stranger turn. Stay with me because it gets a lot messier. What do you say during a 911 call when the emergency is flowers? That's a question Barron Trump may have answered for the first time in history. The teenage son of Donald and Melania Trump reportedly picked up the phone, dialed 911, and lodged a call that quickly became a headline-grabbing moment during the flower bill controversy. The move, shocking as it sounds, perfectly symbolized the chaos brewing inside the Trump family, and clearly things had gotten messy enough for Barron to make what many saw as an over-the-top decision. Let's rewind for a second and imagine the mood at Trump HQ when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett dropped her flower bombshell in front of everyone. If you're picturing casual brunch vibes, think again. Insiders described it as pure pandemonium. Melania was supposedly furious, Donald was ranting left and right, and everyone else was scrambling for a response. This wasn't just some family debate over what's for dinner. This was public humiliation on an international stage, and the usual Trump bravado wasn't working. While Melania reportedly demanded silence, Donald called Crockett every name you'd expect him to pull from his insult checklist.
Nevertheless, what Republicans are doing with this reconciliation process, the travel bans and revoking visas, jeopardizes our national security. It threatens our communities, our higher education, and our economy. Visas to individuals on J or M visas typically improve or impair our economy.
They generally improve the economy, and I can give a brief example. My wife is a very successful woman. She makes a ton of money, which I'm grateful for.
Because when you start to decide that just because somebody came from another country, they are automatically some kind of criminal, that does sound kind of xenophobic to me.
Crazy and nasty were served up on social media quicker than a fast food order, but instead of shifting the spotlight, his insults only gave Crockett's revelations more mileage. She didn't even flinch. The more Trump went on the offensive, the more people were curious about what she'd said. Then came Barron's call, which somehow managed to overshadow even Donald's big mouth for a moment. According to reports, Barron was either overwhelmed by the media firestorm or genuinely thought calling 911 would change the situation. Did he feel his family was under attack? Was it some bizarre misunderstanding? The media couldn't get enough of the story. News outlets of all kinds jumped on the oddity of the moment. After all, this wasn't a typical teenage rebellion or even a cry for help in the traditional sense, but a teenager dialing into law enforcement because flowers and finances had suddenly taken over the headlines. Whether you want to call it a misstep or a misunderstanding, it made one thing clear: the Trumps desperately wanted a way out of this mess. The incident threw even more attention onto Crockett, who seemed entirely unbothered while navigating the backlash. No cheap one-liners, no mudslinging, just a well-orchestrated unveiling of facts that Trump's usual tactics couldn't bury. And that's what probably made the turmoil in the Trump family even worse. Their brand has always relied on controlling the narrative, but Crockett had thrown a wrench into that with one calculated move. Those calm, factual revelations hit harder than all the insults Trump could tweet in a day, and Barron Barron's 911 call. That just added fuel to the fire, making it look like panic mode had spread through the family, top to bottom. Barron's exact words during the call reportedly reflected that sense of siege, though no specifics were officially released. Still, the optics were terrible for a family trying to act unbothered. Here you have a congresswoman asking relatively simple questions about a flower bill, and suddenly police dispatches apparently hearing from the president's son about the ordeal. Of course, this only played into how the public perceived the Trumps as resistant to transparency.
This is very simple. We right now have a white supremacist that is sitting in the White House. He is backed up by other white supremacists. And if you really want to know who the criminals are in this country, you can Google it. You don't have to trust me. Tearing our democracy down physically. And now we have them tearing us down right here from within. But the people that commit 80% of the most violent crimes in this country are white supremacists. Yet for whatever reason, they sit and they serve at the pleasure of the president. They are the ones that were there on January 6th.
For a family that's made a career of demanding answers and accountability from others, it didn't sit well that the roles were being reversed. It's hard to say what Barron's 911 moment really represented, a legitimate reaction to an overwhelming family crisis, or just an out-of-touch slip no one saw coming. Either way, it stood out as a bizarre turning point. The Trump team's go-to response of playing the victim wasn't doing them any favors. In contrast, Jasmine Crockett didn't even have to respond directly to the incident to come out looking like the more composed party. It was clear the damage control measures were only making things worse. But how does one congresswoman remain calm, poised, and in control while exposing some of the most powerful people in America? That's where Jasmine Crockett's strategy really shone, and her ability to flip the tables on the Trump family's usual playbook is something we need to break down next. How does someone like Jasmine Crockett, armed with nothing but facts and a calm delivery, manage to shake one of the most infamous families in America? While the Trumps spiraled into Twitter spats and bizarre 911 calls, Crockett stood her ground, letting cold, hard truth do the heavy lifting. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was just smart. In fact, her strategy was almost unnervingly simple. Stick to the rules, ask clear questions, and let the chaos from the other side do all the talking. And it worked like a charm. Crockett is a rising star in politics, but what makes her stand out isn't just her drive, it's her ability to stay laser focused when others try to derail her.
So my question is, why is it that you need to create an entirely new subcommittee when you literally could go through and do whatever work it is that you're talking about handing over to the gentle lady? Y'all had a chance, you chose not to use it, so why should the American people be convinced that now all of a sudden, because you create a new committee that has been promulgated to find some people that actually care about their constituents? And honestly, whenever y'all are ready to work, we on this side of the aisle have always been ready to do what is right by the American people.
She didn't insult MelaniaTrump over lavish decor or throw digs at Donald over his usual media meltdowns. Instead, she zeroed in on something most people either forgot about or never fully understood: the infamous EB-1 visa, nicknamed the Einstein visa. This isn't your everyday WhatsApp approval notice, by the way. EB-1 visas are for individuals with extraordinary abilities in fields like science, arts, or business. Think Nobel-level scientists or Oscar-winning actors. And Crockett had one question: how exactly did Melania qualify for such an exclusive list? For someone whose resume includes modeling and curating the Be Best slogan, the criteria didn't exactly seem like a natural fit. The backdrop of Crockett's composure was, of course, the Trump family's completely opposite reaction. Donald unleashed his trademark name-calling, dismissing Crockett as crazy, liberal, or whatever random insult came to mind that day. Melania, though often silent, was reportedly livid behind the scenes, furious that the flower bill had paved the way for deeper probes into her background. And then, of course, there was Barron's now infamous 911 call, which became a punchline for everything wrong with how the Trumps managed public scrutiny. But while their panic-fed media headlines, Crockett remained the calm in the storm. Her questions weren't just for laughs or cheap digs. They were designed to reveal a bigger issue about how power shields itself from accountability. It's that bigger picture that makes Crockett's approach so effective. Through her questioning of Melania's spending and visa status, she exposed the stark double standard at play. Donald Trump and his allies allies have spent years pointing fingers, branding others as un-American, corrupt, or untrustworthy. Yet when the same scrutiny circled back to them, the reaction wasn't honesty or grace. It was distraction, denial, and sometimes calls to law enforcement over flower bills. This isn't to say Melania's visa or decorative choices single-handedly dismantle the idea of Trumpian integrity, but Crockett's point was clear. Rules should apply to everyone, and when they don't, someone has to ask why. This isn't just about a giant flower bill, it's bigger than that. This is about who gets to question power. When people in charge, like the Trumps, push back so hard against being held accountable, it begs the question, what are they trying to hide? Transparency isn't the enemy here, silence is. As Crockett calmly exposed facts, the Trump camp scrambled, showing just how uneasy they get when the spotlight of scrutiny shines on them. And this? It's only the beginning, because if there's one thing the flower scandal proved, it's that accountability scares power more than anything else.